Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Welcome back to the show. We are joined once again by Jake Horne from the Student Compass. He's here today again talking about the work he does, especially helping those Gen Z students and young adults, really help take advantage of this thing called a gap year, right? To kind of find themselves, become more independent, self-confident and all. But again, he's back with us here to talk more about the skills and resilience that he can help teach you, of course, and your child. And of course, he's got a lot of experience in this. So he joins us today once again live here on the Zoom and the podcast from the Student Compass. And the website is thestudentcompass.com. Jake, welcome back. How are you today?
I'm fine, Jill. Good morning, and thanks for having me back. By the way, I apologize. I moved my office, and I'm in a big space, but it's also a downstairs bedroom. So it's not supposed to look this way, so sorry, everybody.
It's fine. Well, guess what? I have my virtual background on here as well, all right? So it's fine. You look great. We're excited you're here. We're still in good weather on the Northeast until the rain comes tomorrow, Jake. I know you're based out of Connecticut, correct?
Right. Yep, Washington, Connecticut, and I think we may get a little snow tomorrow. So,
yeah, I know.
Tuesday, Saturday, so yeah.
This is crazy. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do for those new timers out there who are joining us today.
Yes. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jake Horne, and the name of my company is The Student Compass. And I work as a mentor, working with students, the Gen Z cohort, which, these are young guys and gals who were born after 1997 and, spans through 2012. But I have clients that are even older than that. But what essentially I do is I work with students to help them design what's called a gap year, typically between high school and college. And it's really a really unique time when they can separate themselves from what they've been doing for the last 14 years, which is going to school primarily and living in communities which, there's a certain sort of consistency of expectation with these communities. And these kids are at this age, but 17, 18, 19, 20, particularly developmentally, they're really ready to become pre-adults, adults, and they're curious. Yep. They're adventurous. They're really interested in what they don't know and what the world has to offer them. So what we do together really is help them think about themselves, what their interests might be, and really design several experiences for them around the world.
Yeah, and last week we dove into a lot of the careers of the future, and you gave us some insight into that, which, by the way, if you missed that show, you can watch it and go to the website as well. You have a whole list of careers for the future there as well. We talked about preparation and, of course, the present state of society and how things are changing. So, Jake, what did you have in mind for our audience today?
So, aside from the fact, I just wanted to again reiterate the sort of context in which this generation has grown up in. I want to talk more about how unprepared they are to take on these new challenges that are coming down the pike and what they can do about it, and why the gap year really kind of helps them or accelerates them to become more prepared, particularly if they're going off to college, but even if they're going off into the workspace, how they can be much more productive and find meaning in their lives. So if you think about how students, or we all learn, we go to school and we are told and instructed and talked to and at by teachers who are telling us, these are the things you need to know.
Yep.
And that's all predicated on, right now, on a transcript, which is how you take courses, and how you perform determines
a school board, a school regimen from the state, very textbook-like, which is not bad. We need that.
It's not bad in terms of developing foundational skills. The problem is it's all has no context. It's all theoretical. And so, kids don't know what this means in the real world. These are important things to learn, but it's like, well, so what do you do with that? And most of the education today it's pretty thin. It doesn't have depth. It doesn't necessarily have breadth. So when I say breadth, everything, all the disciplines are siloed: English, math, history, science. What's the connection between them? Well, in life, they have a lot of connection, but in school, they don't. And that's not emphasized because that's not what the test-taking system expects. The other part is depth. And the depth has to do with depth of understanding, depth of knowledge. And you can delve into and learn more about a particular set of concepts. But again, it begs the question, what do you do with it? I mean, really, in real fact, how does that apply in life? The thing that's so interesting about the gap year is that it's really the first time students have an opportunity to step into the world and see how their lives and the things they've learned apply in real life, and how they can then take those experiences applied to their understanding, add depth and breadth, and then go off to college or into the world and really be able to participate in a much more creative, innovative, thoughtful way. So I'm really concerned about the idea of the interconnectedness of experience and ideas and how that applies to life. Sorry, I'm being a little cryptic here, but I will, so let's just say, for instance, we have, I'll tell you about a young lady whose name was actually Jill, by the way, interesting enough. She ended up working on a farm in New Zealand, and they have a really great farm system. They have organic farm system. Well, before she went, we were kind of trying to help her design, what the year would look like. She said, well, I just want to go to New Zealand. Let's, and I said, well, this is a really good system because you can, have a place to stay. They feed you, and you can move, from place to place. But I also posed the question, do you know where your food comes from? And her answer to me was the grocery store.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, actually, there's a whole series of things that happen before it actually goes to the grocery store where you buy it. And the point I'm trying to make is that when she went out into the field and learned about how food was grown and all the natural systems that have to be in place for that food to actually be produced, and the integrated networking for that food to get from point A to point B to point C to point C to your local grocery store. It never occurred to her. But the point is, it's important to know, because of the supply chain, and when we experienced this during the pandemic, the supply chain is what makes civilization so vibrant and so has so much upside potential. But when it breaks down, it really breaks down fast, and it has impact on everybody in every aspect of the human experience, not just what food costs, but actually availability. The food that you expect to have isn't going to be there. Yep. Those amenities just aren't going to be there. And this is not just food. But I find food is just one of those incredibly important things, obviously, that we all need.
Correct.
And so she learned not only about what it takes to actually make food, but also what it takes to be a farmer, and what kind of character those individuals are, and the networks that those people have in common with each other, the farmers with the distributors. So I don't mean to harp on this, except that I'm really interested in the connection of things, that students understand that everything has a connection and everything has an impact or ramification. So if you change the way water, the seasonal, the rainy season changes, or the temperature changes in a particular area, it'll change whether food can be grown or not, or whether you have to go through this enormous change of infrastructure to create a whole new system to accommodate climate change. So water is a big deal. She learned one of the things she learned because she was in an area that went through drought cycles and wet cycles, but even more pronounced than, according to the farmer, ever before. She began to understand what migration is all about. Because we talk in the United States, we're talking all about all these people coming to the United States, and all these people pushing against, and wanting to come in, and all they're doing is going to be, taking advantage of our, sophisticated systems. and what we've created and sort of leech off the land. And the point actually is that migration has always been part of the human experience. It's just accelerating. So one of the conversations she had, and she actually ended up going to Costa Rica. I like people going to Costa Rica. It's a great place. Yeah. But she learned a lot about why people migrate from those particular areas in Central and South America. These are people who've lived in those communities for hundreds of years. What does it take for somebody to pick up, leave everything they know, because they can't stay there anymore?
Yeah.
So what she saw this, she had conversations with these people, and she developed a much more sophisticated empathy for the human experience and how these systems that we relied on for so long can change so rapidly, and we have to have more empathy for what it takes. None of us would want to leave our home. No. To be forced out of our home, or because we can't live there anymore because there's no food, or there's conflict. So anyway, that's what I'm really interested in, is when a kid takes a gap year, I want them to understand the connections. It's called the consilience. Edward Q. Wilson, who was a bug man from Harvard, specialized in bugs. It was great.
Writing this down. I never heard of this. Okay, go ahead. Consilience.
Okay, consilience.
Yes.
But it is what consilience is the connectedness of all the systems of the world.
Got it.
This was first sort of poignantly felt and understood when the first astronauts took off into space or low orbit space and took a picture of the Earth and saw it as a blue planet, all one integrated system. So the point being is, if you think about it, things that happen on this globe impact how humans live and thrive or don't thrive, and how other species live and don't thrive. And we're beginning to really experience these kinds of changes now. And it's not just climate, but it's also in technologies, AI, biotech, how businesses operate, and how robotics. I mean, all these things are changing the fabric of work, careers, and the future, and they're all interconnected. And so you can't, for instance, jump in and say AI is great under all circumstances. Just go with it because it makes life easier. It's going to be a utopia. The fact of the matter is that there are all sorts of unknowns that go along with developing an AI system. And it becomes, because we have smartphones, we're always using AIs, and it's getting more and more manifest. These kids have to know that you can't just sort of say, fine, swell, we're just going to go with the flow. There have to be people who are aware of what can happen to society when you have these systems out there. And kids aren't taught this in school. And so when they take their gap year, it's really the first time they're in the real world, experiencing how other people experience the world in a much more natural state. The United States is, we don't live in a natural state. We live in a man-made, human-made, state in which our infrastructure is all constructed. New York City can be there because all the water comes down from upstate New York, And so if that water ceases to flow for whatever reason, what happens to New York? I mean, I don't want to sound cataclysmic here. I want this next generation who are inheriting all of this complexity. I want them to be really much better prepared to think about the future and the impacts of decision making and creating ethical guardrails that take the interests of the society, not just the United States, but the world, because we're all interconnected,
of course.
The world, because if you don't, you've got a bigger, complex mess than ever before. So I don't want to sound grim. There are lots of incredible opportunities these kids are going to have because whole new careers are going to bloom.
Yeah.
Okay, but they have to be ready and they have to have the skills. And most of those skills are not necessarily hard skills, the ones we're used to, which you got hired for in the past. These are skills which have much more
to be learned, a lot of these new skills. Exactly, right? Because schools, again, don't give them these essential tools. These are the type of things you got to kind of walk in, you got to live in, you have to, expand. And there's so much you mentioned. We've talked about, the global conflicts and climate change. And there's all these different, we went through the pandemic and the mental health crisis. And there's all these things that are happening in our world that are not in textbooks, even, non-binary identity confusion. We're dealing with different types of shifts that these are not taught in school unless you have a really good teacher that goes off cuff and off book. But a lot of people aren't getting that. So it's really amazing because also the Gen Z generation of them being on their iPads, being on their computers, they need to get away from that and get out of their, the social media world and to look at the world from basically a new perspective. And I know this is what you offer with this gap year training in a sense, right?
And very often these kids will end up putting their phones down. I mean, they're often away in another country. They'll put their phones down and they will kind of disconnect. They won't, and they begin to realize that they don't have to have the phone clipped on the side of their head all the time, but there's an incredible world around them. And the world, and they're going to have to live with it because artificial, virtual reality, augmented reality. I mean, that's just that's all digital. That's not real, and that's not life. And these systems that we live in, that we've been dependent on for the last 10 to 15,000 years, which is when primarily human civilization has evolved. They're all changing so rapidly that you have to be, if you're going to do something of value that has real meaning, you've really got to be aware of what these systems are, which means you have to open your eyes and you have to observe the world and you have to have conversations and you have to step away from what you are accustomed to get a better perspective. One of the coolest things that I always get from the kids that I do gap years is, I ask them, well, what is your understanding or feeling about the United States? Yeah. And because they've been away, they've been outside the United States, and say, it's an amazing country. It's an amazing place. There's so much I didn't understand about it, and there's so much I took for granted. And I don't want to do that anymore. It's exciting. This is a really interesting, vibrant country. But we are living in a moment now which is really critical. People are reacting because change is outstripping the ability of all of the institutions that we have created in the United States to deal with the normal human experience in the United States. We can't keep up with it again, I mean, you have a bunch of senators in a hearing talking about the impact of technology, but the senators don't even have the vocabulary to understand what the technology actually is. So how do you create effective guardrails? How do you make good policy? And again, I don't want to get into politics here. That's not my point. My point is this generation at this particular moment is uniquely in a position to make a profound difference in terms of creating a world which is healthier, more supportive of the human circumstance. And I think they want to. I think they see it. They've grown up with all this trauma, all this dysfunctionality. They have high anxiety and nervousness, and they're scared about the future. But they are also kids. They're curious, and they want to do something that has meaning. So the beauty of the gap year is they step out of all this anxiety, all of this managed life they've lived. And they get to practice developing those skills of independence and self-advocacy, problem solving without somebody telling them what to do. And they begin to develop a whole new way of thinking, whole new habits, which then they can take off into the future when they go to college. And they can be the leaders in college. They can be the thinkers in college. They can be the individuals who are challenging status quo and coming up with new and innovative ways not to just make money, but actually to do something more than just make money.
Yeah.
To do something that has real purpose and meaning.
And purpose. And
And they're looking for it. These kids want to have a meaning in their lives.
Well, for those out there wondering what it's like to work with you, what is the plan? How do we work with the students during this gap year? What is your role at the Student Compass? And let's talk a little bit more about that, if you don't mind, how someone does get involved in the process.
So I call myself a mentor as opposed to a counselor,
teacher, guru.
I mean, the idea of the mentor it really harks back to the Greeks and Socrates and all sort of those philosophers. They were mentors. They had students who they counseled to think. And it was always the why was always the question that was posed back. Why do you think that way? Where's that? Why does that happen? The mentor does not tell anybody what to do. The mentor guides students toward possibilities. And it's up to the student to exercise their thinking and practice their thinking. So when I work with students, I start off really with them, just certainly building rapport and getting to know them, but also talking about what they value, what's important to them. And most of these kids kind of they scratch their head, they were, I don't know, they haven't really thought about it. And so I give them a list of 100 possible values, and I said, give me 20, and they get me 20. And then we start talking about each one of those and say, well, what does that mean? The point being is I want them to think harder about the things that they have taken for granted, and to begin to integrate that into the way they think about what they think is important. And invariably, these kids get down to sort of 5. I make them work hard, and what are those 5 values that you think are most important? It invariably, comes down to friendships, love, family, communication, curiosity, discovery. These these really lovely things, and so they drop the money thing after a little while because it really it doesn't make it. I harp on the money thing because it's so much a part of the American culture. But what really they do is they begin to think about who they are, and I want them to develop this self-awareness. Who am I? What are my strengths? What are my abilities? What am I capable of? And to work hard at thinking about what that is and those things are. And we work hard at that. And ultimately, when we start looking at possible things to do during their gap year, it's how those values and how they think and what's important to them, what they think meaning might be, and purpose, and how that could be reflected in this experience, this year experience. Because what I want them to do, and frankly, getting out of their space into a new space which is unfamiliar, that stretches them out, makes them feel just a little uncomfortable, is what everybody needs to do. So what we talk about, so they go into it thinking and understanding what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what do I need to work on, and then we schedule with them up together. They plan it, they do the booking, they do have the conversations. I spend time prompting them, think about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, what are you looking for.
Okay.
I want them to keep on reflecting back on what it is that they're looking to do and how they're going to do it. And so ultimately, they go off and do the first thing. It's usually 3 months long, 2 months long. Anything short of that than that is not long enough. Anything longer than that crimps the full year because you can't do everything you want to do. But so they go off and they go up into, again, I keep on loving Costa Rica. They go and work with butterflies. And they begin in Costa Rica and they work on a butterfly farm. And they begin to understand the ecology of butterflies and how the migration of butterflies and how integral they are to pollination. But anyway, I want them to be then reflecting on what they're learning as they go. Not just the hard stuff, but their feelings about it too. So they keep journals. And and when they come home after their first experience, we talk about it. We spend time talking about what it is that you thought. Let's reflect about it. I tell them to take as many pictures as they can and write notes about where they were and what they were thinking. And so through this exercise, throughout not really 9 months or more, they end up having 3 very different kinds of experiences and spending a lot of time thinking about what it was like. Mm-hmm. They also build this great sense of capacity, their ability to be confident and take on things they may not understand, but they can do it if they put their mind to it. And so they're off in these new places. They're learning new languages. They're learning new customs. They're learning about what it's like to live in these communities, which are very different than the communities they come from. And that gives them a much different perspective about the world and how humans live in the world. And every culture has its own relationship with nature. Yeah. Every community has its own relationship with urban versus rural. I mean, it's all and it's important for these kids to have as much juxtaposition in these experiences as possible, and to be thinking about their place. So that's what the gap year is designed to do. Because then, when they go off to college, they're going as much different people. They're much more adult. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense of the word. They are agents of their own life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, we are just about out of time. We have a minute left on the clock. And as always, Jake, I appreciate the conversation and what you're doing. But unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up.
Yep. Sure. So if you want to get in touch with me, I'd love to talk to you. I love it. And if people have questions, and I can answer them, with no encumbrances. But again, it's Jake Horne, Horne. My email is Jake, JakeHorne, 8216@gmail.com. My telephone number is 860-921-6158. And the website, there's a lot there if you want to take a look. www.thestudentcompass, one word, the Student Compass at, oh my God, what is it?
Oh my God.
.com, sorry.
It is. Yes, thestudentcompass.com. We got it. Right. Thank you so much, Jake Horne. Not a problem. Pleasure having you here. Always full of information and help guiding these Gen Z generations along the way. Yeah. Great. Thank you for the discussion, and we'll talk soon, Jake. Right. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.
You have a nice Thanksgiving. See you.
Thank you. You too. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Jake. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jill.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
So you see, son, good manners are very, very important. Someday, many years from now, when you're a grown-up, you'll be a man. And when you are, you should be a gentleman. Do you want me to go through it one more time?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Exactly. Always say please, thank you, you're welcome, and excuse me. Sit up straight, hold doors open for ladies. If a door's shut, then knock first. Don't burp, don't swear, don't speak with your mouth full, don't reach across people's plates, keep your elbows off the table.
What table?
And don't interrupt. While we're at it, don't stare, don't use foul language, don't call people names, but do remember people's names. Always share your toys, play nice, and cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. On the bus, give up your seat to anyone who has trouble standing bottom line. Treat others the way you'd like to be treated. Got it?
Got it.
And stop picking your nose.
Most parenting is hard to do in just 2 minutes. But spending just 2 minutes twice a day making sure they brush their teeth is easier and could help save them from a lifetime of tooth pain. For fun 2-minute videos to watch while brushing, visit 2min2x.org. That's 2min2x.org. A message from the Partnership for Healthy Mouths, Healthy Lives, and the Ad Council.